What's happening, everybody? How y'all making out? You hanging in there? Might have to put those cookies down and do some push-ups and some chin-ups. Play some double paradiddles. Some patty fla-flas. Today's guest is drummer Dave Rosenberg, New Jersey's own post-hardcore Titans Deadguy. And with late 90s mathcore bands that I was a big fan of and fortunate enough to see live in the Dillinger Escape Plan, noting Deadguy as an influence, and especially early on where you can hear that influence more apparently. It was definitely cool talking to Dave about all that goodness. In any case, Dave and I get into the history of the band, the upcoming documentary on the band by Fourth Media Productions. What up, Will Saunders? Dangerous shows, van breakdowns, revisiting the recording experience of those records, and a reunion show that didn't happen. Damn you, COVID, you miserable son of a bitch. Crash Bang Boom Podcast can be found on my SoundCloud and YouTube page, as well as Google Play, Podbean, Stitcher, Luminary, and more. Basically everywhere other than Spotify, but I might change that soon. Check out my Facebook and Instagram pages for additional content and updates. Please give me a like and or a follow and or a subscription if you could. The support is appreciated. Shout out to my sponsor, New Orleans Record Press, who's pressing the hell out of some records presently. Has a quicker turnaround than most. And they can even help you with design to mastering, electroplating, vinyl coloring options, packaging, and more. They even got that handy little real-time quote generator to remind you of how expensive it is to print records. But I'd like to think it's worth it, because records sure as hell sound good. And that's NewOrleansRecordPress.com, so give them a holler. So here we go. Dave Rosenberg, Deadguy. 'Twas some seething red-hot intensity with that band. Holy moly. Man, I hope I can catch them if they come back through. Crash, bang, boom.
Crowds go mad with joy.
Yeah! All right, I'm here with Dave Rosenberg, the one and only Deadguy. As far as I could tell, we're having a geographically distant conversation thanks to the internet. I'm in Brooklyn. You're in Amsterdam. How the hell are you doing, my friend?
Yeah, I mean, old Amsterdam, new Amsterdam, as it were.
Yeah, right?
Yeah,
good one.
no, it's good. We've been here about 2 years. I moved kind of a little bit of a weird life change in that my daughter's now 13, was going to change schools anyway. We were living in San Francisco for almost 20 years.
Wow.
And which shows how old I am. But the kid was changing schools. I got this very sort of I don't want to say random, but a little bit of a random job offer. Mm-hmm. And so we said, screw it, and picked everything up, took the kid and the dog, moved out here 2 years ago, and then I thought I was going to be moving back to the States. They like to say that. I thought we'd be back in April or May of this year, actually, into New York.
Whoops.
And glad I didn't get a place. So we've been here now, but as crazy a time we're in right now, the Dutch have actually handled it shockingly well. So we actually just went on like a road trip. We drove down to Italy and down to France and stuff. And so, knock on wood, it's been okay.
Nice. Wow.
Yeah.
So I was wondering how you ended up there. So it was not necessarily a permanent move initially, but it sounds like, who knows what the plan is to come back now?
It wasn't permanent, but it was like, hey, whatever. It was one of those kinds of things. We still have the house in San Francisco, which is like a weird blessing and curse kind of thing, where it's like, hey, cool, got a house and it's worth money. Right. On the other hand, it's like, I don't see any of that money sitting there. And the biggest thing that I miss most is that I actually had the reason we bought that house in the first place was that it had a basement,
nice.
Which is pretty rare. So I had like I don't know, maybe 14 by 12 or something like that room.
Wow.
Where I never bothered soundproofing it because it was about 3/4 on the ground. Mm-hmm. And so, but I could play drums basically nice. Full volume all the time. Wow. Up until the neighbors would be 10 o'clock at night or whatever. So that was like a huge thing, man. We had that house for like, I don't know, however many years. And at the time I had actually gone back to, I wouldn't say I stopped playing, but I wasn't playing nearly as much for a while when we lived in San Francisco. Believe it or not a great music town.
Really?
I swear that, it's very surprising. I really didn't find a lot of people to play with. And then eventually I did. But I went back to studying with a guy named Tommy Igoe, and I'd actually studied with his father when I was a kid. In New Jersey.
Amazing.
Yeah, that was like my indoctrination into I still play the goddamn Lifetime warm up every day because of
it's a hell of a
Tommy and Sonny.
Yep.
It is. It's the one you do.
Yep.
So I was back I had kind of weird jobs over the last couple of years. And so I had time. Studying with Tommy was like a full-time job.
Yeah.
It was like I had to practice like at least 2 hours a day just to keep up with my lessons.
Wow.
So that was a lot, but it changed. It made me a lot better player. It made me better. He'll tell you, it made you a better musician, which is true.
Yeah.
But you made me a lot better drummer, and made it more interesting again.
Nice. Yeah, that's funny you mentioned the Lifetime warm-up. I got that DVD when it came out, and have since ripped it because now none of my computers have DVD slots that work anymore. So I still have the video that I ripped.
Of course.
From it, so I just pull that up into my QuickTime player and play along with it. I never really got into like the advanced one, but I definitely do like the intermediate one, and I'll go through it every now and again. So it's definitely a challenge, though, no doubt.
It was like I probably started playing with Sonny in like 87, something like that.
Yeah,
88, along those lines. So I was in high school,
right?
And my father was a real big band guy,
okay.
Real into, and he was really into like Benny Goodman and things like that. And so
sure. I
learned about like Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich and all those things. And Sonny played with like Woody Herman and all these other people. Mm-hmm. And my father, oddly enough, somehow knew the trombone player in like the band that Sonny played with. Oh. In like the active older adult band, mm-hmm. and went to go see him play. And I was like, Jesus, these guys are unbelievable. And they were in their like 60s then,
Right.
And killed it. And so I started like taking lessons from him. I was probably, maybe a junior in high school or something like that. And he helped me basically get into every music program for every college that I applied to.
Wow.
So I had like back then I had like serious chops coming out of like high school into college, because it was all like marching band and crap like that.
Totally.
But I was still a big metalhead. So it was, the upside was that I could play Maiden songs, and I could play triples on the bass drum, because I was doing that either from Led Zeppelin, but also from all these things. Like, it's funny when you listen to stuff now and you're like, man, this fill is awesome or whatever. And then you're like, Buddy Rich threw that away in 1940.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So it's always, so I learned a lot of that kind of stuff way back when.
Yeah. I don't know if you know the drummer Chris Maggio. I've spoken to him as well. He's from Jersey. He too studied with Tommy's father, and he also took a ton of lessons from Joe Morello, who was out in New Jersey as well. So he grew up studying with Joe Morello and Tommy's father, and it sounded like both. He also to this day has great hands.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you mentioned that you study with those guys, because there was a couple of things that struck me the first time that I heard Deadguy. One was just the overall like sheer intensity of it. But also, in listening to your playing, I thought I would be willing to bet that this guy has studied a little bit, because your hands sounded stronger than I would say others might, who played sort of heavier music like that at the time, So I could kind of hear it in your playing, is what I'm saying. Yeah. Yeah,
it's funny. I feel like the recording of the Fixation album it didn't really sound like the way I played necessarily. I did, of course. Like it's always sort of like you listen to Rush and like, well, it sounds like Neil Peart.
Right.
Not that I'm comparing myself, but it sort of sounded like the way I played. But it was hard to get. It's hard to play like a lot of nuances in heavy music. And I'm like a big ghost note kind of guy.
Yeah.
But I snuck in all the I snuck in a lot of jazzy sort of things into those songs. Whether it was just the swing itself, or using weird time signatures or whatever else. So yeah, there was definitely some thought put into it. The Chris Maggio, by the way, I do know him. You know who else? There's a bunch of guys who. One of the guys I went to kindergarten with, oddly enough, Greg Sundell. I went to Sonny, and he went to Joe Morello.
Oh wow.
He's still a professional drummer, whereas I am a. So he kept going.
Yeah. And I love talking to bands that were around in the 90s, as someone who was very much influenced myself by the 90s and so many of the bands that came out at the time. I'd like to just ask you sort of about the origin of Deadguy and maybe some of the influences on your band, because it's funny. I can hear Helmet in so many bands in the mid-90s specifically, but even prior to that, I mean, I guess you had like Rorschach, who was out of Jersey, and then Bitch Magnet from elsewhere, and Dazzling Killman from elsewhere. So some of those sort of earlier, noisier sort of post-hardcore bands, I guess that's what we would call it now. I don't know what they were calling it at the time. But tell me a little bit about the origins of Deadguy, and then maybe some of the influences that you feel were happening.
We were in New Brunswick in college at the time, And you'll see all this and hear all this in the documentary that Bill over at Fourth Media is working on to come out this fall.
Will Saunders, what's up, dude?
Yeah, shout out to our buddy Bill, who's really a true gentleman in the metal world.
Totally.
But me and Crispy had played briefly in a band called Lifetime together, which goes back to like early 90s. Neither one of us liked the band, but we had stayed friends. And Crispy went off to BU, Boston, or BC, whatever it was. He moved to Boston for college. Lasted like 6 months, decided he hated Boston, came back and was going to Rutgers. And I was living about to move into this house with like 12 people. And Crispy was like, yeah, I need a place to live. I'm going to go to school too. So we ended up being roommates, and we would sit in our basement. At the time, I was playing in a band called Mr. Thumb, which was like sort of a proggy, guys who could play kind of like a weird prog whatever, going nowhere. But I was also at a record store in New Jersey called Vintage Vinyl. I don't know if that sounds familiar to you. But Vintage Vinyl was like it was like a big indie record store at the time. And so we would get all the like 7 inches of every label. So AmRep or whatever it may be, like all that spaz stuff.
Yep.
And so I basically listened to everything. And so, I was getting into kind of whatever you want to call it, the new world of this heavy, noisy crap.
Right.
And me and Crispy were like playing jazz in our band because he was a bass player. And we also had this weird luxury, as you know, being on the East Coast. Like we just drive into the city. And at the time, the tunnel was outrageously expensive. Yeah. So we'd get our $10 or whatever, and we'd drive into New York, and we would just go to CB's or wherever, Babyland or the Continental, like basically twice a week, or something like that. And it was great because we'd leave our house at say 10 o'clock. It would take us, not even, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes or so to get into the city. We'd go to a show, and we'd drive home, and that was it. And we worked dumb jobs, so it wasn't like we had we weren't in school too. So literally, we went to go see the Unsane, and we couldn't believe how heavy they were. It was like punishing to be in that room.
Totally.
Yeah, it was like, man, and that was when Vinny was relatively new, the drummer.
Yep.
It was like, man, this is the heaviest friggin' thing I've ever heard, and we were like, we've got to go do a band that's sort of like, basically, it wasn't going to be heavier than the Unsane, but we wanted to do something like just, heavy like that. Yeah. And at the time, you're right, Helmet was huge. Like that was a big thing. They had put out, I guess, Meantime, right, which I think was like just such a groundbreaking record that's overlooked all the time by heavy music people. Yeah. And so there was that. The first couple of Dazzling Killing albums. There was a bunch of 7 inches from these weird labels out of like, Minnesota and places like that. There was the AmRep stuff. I mean, Today's the Day, of course, I always reference as like one of the most important. Steve Austin to me, like a minor league musical genius who again never really will get his. I'd like to see him get his time. Yeah. And then bands like Buzz Oven, I was super into that like heavy stuff but musically. It wasn't particularly hard to play, and so as as a drummer, at some point, like if you keep practicing, you're like, I got to play harder stuff, and so that's why so many people like Rush and Maiden and bands like that, because like it's hard to play. Like, it's still hard to play now, right? And so we really were like, man, we're gonna play heavy, but we're gonna try to take it like a little bit more in this direction of making it, it wasn't like extreme is the wrong word, but how do you add some degree of like tension into all this kind of stuff? And it's just sort of what it came out like. This is everybody. I think you try to start a band, you're like, we're going to sound like X, and then this is just what happened when we were in the room together. Right. And so me and Crispy took one of our roommates, Tim Nauman, aka Pops, and he had like an acoustic guitar, but he was a punk rocker like the rest of us. And we were like, all right, we're going to teach you how to play bass, and that's going to be it. And Tim Singer was somewhat bizarrely on the ultimate frisbee team with one of our roommates who lived in a house of like 12 people. Oh God. And and like it was a super weird. Our upstairs was sort of extreme punk rock hardcore kids, and the downstairs were a couple of guys on the rowing team or something like that. It was super weird. Yeah. They knew Tim, and so we became friendly, and we said, we should try to do a band, and so we did, and that was it. So we basically we ended up playing in our backyard. We had like a backyard show in New Jersey. We played like 2 cover songs or something like that. And I think we played Nervous Breakdown and something else. I can't remember. And then from there, we wrote some more songs. We played in our basement and whatever else. And like, it was just a wall of sonic crap. It's like people asked me what it sounded like. It was like, well, my earplugs never worked. There was always tremendous feedback, and and they tuned it volume. That's like my big takeaway of
totally.
And so, but we sort of got better, right? So we went and recorded the first 7-inch at Tracks East with Steve Evitz, hero of many people. And if you go back to like the first 7-inch, like I actually think some of the playing that I'm doing is more interesting, to be honest. But I think it's just because you can hear it more,
right?
It's just more to like the there's something about those like 8 tracks of recording or whatever. We couldn't afford 16, I think. I mean, we could only afford 8.
Yeah.
And so you get a different sound. Makes you kind of do it differently. And so that was sort of the start of it. And then as we were kind of going along, we were definitely well received. I think people didn't know what they were getting into, or they weren't. We'd go to play and it was like, we showed up and we're here to kill you.
Right.
And it was still sort of like, let's mosh it up, skinheads, but without skinheads.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of a weird thing that we'd show up, play a lot of heavy stuff, but we had so many weird, not necessarily purposefully weird, but just how it came out, a lot of stops and starts.
Yeah.
A lot of weird parts in that regard, all the harmonics and stuff in the good end. Actively avoiding certain trite things on the drums, which you never can do. But it's like, how many times you hear like the same band do like, the same beat of like, adding that little 16th note of the one E and or whatever, just like stupid that I was trying to avoid, right? And like, how can I bring in 6/8? How can I bring in quasi shuffle or whatever into these songs? And then me and Crispy would just write all the songs, and like we would go in our basement and would be like, all right, let's do a part in 7, and then we would go listen to Dazzling Gilman and say, okay, how did they do this thing? And
Right,
and
totally.
that's how it really started. And so all those bands were like, really influential. Other things, Crispy, huge Morbid Angel fan.
Okay.
Celtic Frost, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then we had obviously all the hardcore stuff that we had grown up with.
Right.
But we also sort of missed a bunch of stuff. Like, I saw Agnostic Front when I was probably like 14. I've never been so terrified at CBGB's.
Oh, I bet.
And then I basically skipped a lot of stuff to go to. Then as the Straight Edge came out, there was a lot of kind of whatever you want to call it, more emotional in a jockey way.
Right.
But that wasn't really who we were. We were a little bit more, obviously, on the darker side, coming from so much metal.
Wow. That's cool, man. Well, I mean, I guess in the early days of touring and just getting out there, you said that the band was well received, but I'm sure people were shocked if you're sharing a bill with a band and then they go there not knowing anything about you, and you walk in and then they're pummeled by the intensity that was your band. So, like, what were some of the bands once y'all got out there that y'all were playing with that you might have felt as though y'all were kindred spirits, as I like to say, in such a sort of micro subgenre, basically?
Yeah. You know what's funny about it? The guys that we toured with the most are a band called Doc Hopper from Boston. I don't know if you know them. Like pop punk, like just full on pop punk, like Descendants kind of.
Right.
And somewhat bizarrely, we were like brothers with them. And we played with them all the time, and it made zero sense from a sort of unless you looked at it and said, well, here's like the punk rock spectrum,
right?
And said here, but it made no sense. Guys we played with once Keith joined us, which was a little bit after the first 7-inch, going into the second one and into the album. He had come from Rorschach at a slightly different network, I guess.
Right.
He had just more people. A lot of it was sort of like that. Was sort of the gutter punk. It was less metal than you'd think. It was a lot of these kind of like squattery kids, and then there was bands like they played with Avail, like Rorschach and Avail played like how we did with Doc Hopper.
Right.
Again, totally bizarre.
Yeah.
So we played with we went on tour with Bloodlet. So that was obviously made some good sense there. There was a band from upstate New York called Dismay that we played with all the time. We were like really metal.
Yeah.
We played with Dazzling Gilman once at the Knitting Factory, which somehow was very appropriate. Yeah, cool, right?
Yeah.
And like it was like the early show, and John Zorn played that night.
Wow.
So it was And that was sort of towards the in Dave Whitty of Municipal Waste and Human Remains and all that was like came to that show and is to this day brings up the fact that I didn't play the fills the exact same way at the beginning of John Deere. So like,
that's hilarious.
It's like, I don't know, man. Buddy Rich never played the same thing twice.
Totally.
That's my,
Yeah.
Right. That's how I learned. This is it. You never. So I didn't realize how much. And now it's like when I watch. I watched this video the other day of Brand from Mastodon.
Yep.
He plays those goddamn songs exactly the same way. It's amazing.
I know. It's crazy town. And he's been doing that.
I can't do it.
Yeah, me neither. I'm not that player necessarily either. It's like 2-3 kill key fills over the course of a record. I'll maybe hit those because I feel like they're important. The other ones, I'm like, fuck it. I'm not going to set myself up for that. It's not fun. It's not as fun for me.
No, I'm not that smart. I'm not either. It's just not. So that was cool. We got to play with a bunch of things. We played with Neurosis a couple times. Nice. Another one that made sense. I think it was always funny because we felt like we were dark, and then Neurosis came and they're like, oh Jesus. Like the adults are
darkest.
Here.
Yeah. Fucking vampires are coming out.
We played with them on New Year's Eve in Connecticut at the Tune-In, which was like a pretty big club at the time. And they wouldn't stop at midnight. It was like the best, you know what I mean?
Nice.
They're ruining your whole year. And just to this day, I'm like, these guys are the best. Nothing matters.
Right.
And we played with a bunch of like those, victory bands like Snapcase and that kind of stuff. But, really became more of like, who do we want to hang out with? Who do we want to see? And, touring, we broke down all the time. And this is the history of the band is basically every van we ever had broke down incessantly.
God.
And so as fun as it would be to go out on tour would also be like, this is going to end badly. So, we played with we also on that Bloodlet tour was a band called 454 Big Block. To this day, I have no idea what they sound like, but they were the coolest guys and super fun, cool to be on the road with them. And they were very tough. They were from Boston. And so if things were going sideways, you want them in your corner.
Yeah.
But we got to play with a lot of, super random ones like Warzone, things like that. We played with Chorus of Disapproval if you're going into the dregs of stuff. But it was kind of a whatever you want to call it, a transitional time, right? So we were coming out of New York hardcore ourselves, right? So my first CBGB's show was in 1986, I think.
Yeah.
I saw Murphy's Law in Token Entry.
Wow.
But I had seen Kiss at Madison Square Garden when I was 8.
Nice.
1980. I still have the ticket. Yeah. And so I'd gone to Maiden and stuff like that. I'd seen all these been Ozzy, but it wasn't until then you go to CB's and you're like, holy cow, this is a whole other thing.
Right.
And we were sort of the last generation of that, of people who would go to those shows. And then we played there a bunch. And the first time, you'd mentioned weird stories where the first time I actually felt like a pseudo rock star. We played a sold out Saturday night at CB's and it was anarchy. Wow. It was disconcerting. It was that kind of thing, I was it's going sideways where, I had to have 2 or 3 people around me. The stuff wouldn't get knocked over. We played with Clutch one time at, it was WSOU, had an anniversary show in, it was somewhere in New Jersey. It was in Irvington, I think, wherever it was. And full on chaos. Somebody came flying on the stage and knocked half the drum set over. It was that kind of thing, floor tom gone, that it was had to have a guy sit in front of the bass drum because the chaos was ensuing in these things. And so, those were good times. That kind of stuff is just such a crazy thing. And there was places there was pockets. Connecticut was a big one. Massachusetts. Man, Virginia Beach, we were loved in Virginia Beach for some reason. No idea. Yeah, to this day, I have no idea. Huh. We even went back there and we played. It was the last tour, one of the last shows, and then we drove home from it. We played Virginia Beach. It's some dude's house, and it was we were late. We'd been on the road forever. It was just miserable. You couldn't get through to bring all the equipment in. Yeah. People were they were angry at us for being late. And, it was that cathartic moment of just it was so, we just came there and punished them. And, literally we left. That was it. Those are the kind of things now that are funny to me. But at the time it was this sucks, So
Totally.
it's always yeah.
Wow. Did y'all play any like house shows that you remember? Because I've seen straight up like club shows where people it's looking like it's claustrophobic, and I would be thinking, as you mentioned, that things could be looking like they were about to go fucking sideways. So,
all the time.
All the time, right?
Yeah, we played in New Jersey all the time. In New Brunswick, we play our basement on Somerset Street. We'd play the Handy Street, which is where these Bouncing Souls guys, who were another, oddly buddies of ours.
Yeah.
We'd play those. We played there were some funny ones on tour where you'd go to like, I don't know, Virginia or Maryland or somewhere, and like, the kids' moms in the kitchen, like the dog shits the floor because it's too scared from the
All right.
Sleeping on the pool table, because it's too far to drive to the next place.
Oh, man.
North Carolina, literally the hottest I've ever been in my life. We just saw a video of it, and I still have I get like a horrible reaction when I see this video of us playing there. Oof. It was, had to be 100 degrees and 100% humidity kind of thing.
Yes.
So that was those, but I mean, we did it all the time. There was a place, Keith once put his foot through some guy's wall by accident by rocking out too hard in San Diego. Always, everything that could go wrong, like we had it happen basically all the time.
Right.
That was where we did, you learn the lessons now of like, man, would have been smart to have like a second hi-hat, whatever hi-hat clutch, right? Or,
right.
Crispy had one guitar, and then we were on the road somewhere, and he's like, maybe I should just buy a second one. Like for $100, he bought a backup guitar.
Nice.
Because he would break strings incessantly.
Oh, I bet.
One time on the Deadguy on the Fixation album, yeah, it was Crazy Eddie or Rides. It was Crazy Eddie. I think we only literally played it once, and I had my favorite bass drum pedal was the Yamaha. I think it was the FP 700. Do you remember that one?
Uh-huh.
It was a flat footboard. Yeah. I must have had 4. They were the best. The goddamn thing broke in half in the middle of that song.
Oh boy.
And like, what are the odds of that? You know what I mean? So we never played the song again, and I switched to DW. So there you go.
Wow. I had one buddy that would break the footboard of his pedals, but he did a heel toe technique, but he wore dress shoes, and he played in a loud ass rock band. So when he's doing heel toe technique to get more notes out of it, he's slamming a hard dress shoe sole into the thing. So he broke foot plates all the time.
Yeah, I'll get you.
To this day, that hasn't happened to me, thankfully. Knock on wood.
No, I never heard of such a thing. I mean, break cymbals, whatever. But I just felt like it was I think, by the way, we were playing to maybe 8 people at that show. So
wow.
We also and some of those things, you'd get like these the shows just kind of get you the next way. We played one of those. It must have been like, I don't know, West Virginia or somewhere like pretty redneck, where they had the chicken wire.
Oh, wow. Blues Brothers style. Jesus.
Yeah, dude. That was something. And nobody came.
Man.
And we were just like, we'll just play anyway, whatever, because that was how we would get like our $15.
Yeah.
And but we started playing, and people were not pleased, except for one guy who just came up and started singing, and like Tim just gave him the mic, and he was just singing like, I'm gonna kill you, like that kind of stuff.
Nice.
So and at that point we were just playing like Black Flag and Misfit songs with this dude.
Yeah.
And this is this is pre-camera phone, so all of this magic is lost.
Right. Totally, man. Oh my God. When you went in to record Fixation on a coworker, what was your experience with that? You had said that you kind of in listening to the earlier 7 inches, you feel as though your playing comes across maybe a little bit better, but they all sound intense to me, and the drumming all sounds pretty killing. So I'm just curious with what your thoughts were on that record and recording it.
Appreciate that. Yeah, it's always obviously a hindsight, right?
Yeah.
But at the time, I think, I wasn't super, I'm still not happy with the snare sound. Mm-hmm. It still bothers me to this day. But I think in the mix of the whole thing, it sounds right. Like the drums sound right.
Right.
It's just not necessarily like I necessarily, I don't think we ever sounded like that, but that's okay. Mm-hmm. Those drums never sound like, those were the same drums I used to play live all the time and everything.
Was it a Pearl kit?
It was a Pearl BLX. And I think on the Fixation record, I had like a 12 and a 13 tom. And then I think when Fixation, I bought a 10. I did a 10, 12, 16.
Okay.
Which I was into. And I also had this, Evans came out with that new bass drum head at the time. God, it had like it was like a double layer coating. I can't think of what it's called.
Not the EMAD, huh?
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah. And that made a huge difference. And then I've been playing DW snares for quite a while. I was always a Ludwig guy growing up. And then I got a DW snare that became like the Deadguy snare, and also a pasty ride, like a 20-inch. I don't remember what it was called. It was like the loud, it's like the loud ride or something like that. Yeah. But it had almost, it had a really small bell. I was never a big bell player, but really like biting sort of like cut through on that. And so I played that Pearl set on that record, and then all on tour and stuff. And then a couple years ago, I actually sort of I retired it, and I bought I now play a Yamaha BLX, or is it BLX? No, sorry, it's the Birch Custom Absolute. There we go.
Okay, nice.
Before they when they switched the Yamaha production out of Japan, right? Those last Japanese sets, they sound different than the new ones do, no matter what anybody says. Yeah. And so I got that. So I play those now, and I have another DW snare, and I also got I play a Gretsch bop set, like an 18-inch bass drum, like an 18, 12, 16, or 14. I can't even remember, with the matching snare. Nice. Yeah. So the drums are, it's interesting. As you know, it's like at some point drums sort of sound like drums, but then cymbals become a lot more interesting, and that's been like a lot of my big realization in all this now. So like I definitely play lighter sticks now. Yeah. So I think when we were doing the Deadguy stuff, I was probably playing a 5B. Right. Not really a hammer, but certainly like not a light. You're not getting a lot of nuance there. But I was competing against loud guitars all the time. Absolutely. So the recordings are tough. As you know, it's like you're trying to nail this thing first try. Some of those songs are harder than others, of course. Like Doom Patrol was, I think, maybe first or second take. There's a fill at the beginning that I hate to this day, but the rest of it sounds okay. Some of them, like Pins and Needles, we had been playing for a while, so you probably get one or two shots of it. But I recorded all the drums for that album in one day. Awesome, 10 tracks. Probably. Yeah, maybe 4 hours all in, after getting sounds. And y'all aren't recording with click tracks or anything, right? You're just blasting through it? Yeah, it was like, now I'm like, poof, it's like of course, Dave Lombardo never used a click. That's my excuse. True. Very true. We practiced enough, where we were relatively in time. I didn't have bad time. I tend to rush as a drummer, as everybody's got their issue. I'm a rusher. Yep. So we did okay on that. I think when you go through the tracks, the main thing for me was like, I've now realized Tim Singer always said, well, it's nice to have a band that uses dynamics, because I guess other bands of his didn't. Me and Crispy were always real big on that. Some of it just comes from because classic rock was always big on dynamics. Yeah. But I also noticed that the thing that we got right was tempos in general. So like there's enough mix of tempos in the album where it doesn't all sound like the same thing, which is hard to come by. But some of it, like some of the songs like Baby Arm, there's some parts that are very awkward, and so some of it was sort of like me and Keith or me and Crispy could play, but we sometimes would struggle altogether to play these parts. Yeah. So practice, man. You got to practice. That's what happens. Yeah. And I mean, there are also those moments in some of those songs where you slow down, if you want to accentuate, the beat down riff, if you want to call it that. But, it's more of a pain in the ass to tempo map that stuff and then be beholden to it and transition from one BPM to the next. So you're just better off running it the way you did it when you have those parts anyway, in my opinion. I think it sounds more natural. Oh, yeah. So no, it's super hard. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the variability, if you like to listen to Zeppelin or Jimi Hendrix or whatever, like they are not in time. Right. In Black Sabbath, same thing. Totally. It's like it's all over the map. Totally. Yeah. So for me, I accept it. I've been doing, so we actually secretly, I've been recording, before we moved, I recorded a bunch of stuff in my basement. So we have a bunch of new Deadguy songs. Nice. And I did them to a click, where I bought spent like $1,000 of buying mics, mic'd everything up. So I did, real live drum recording, which is horrifically difficult. Right. It's like, geez, it took me months to get it to be right. And then since I've been living here, I've been doing it on electronic, which I loathe. Right. But, it gets the job done. So now I go to like a rehearsal place nearby and I record live drums and I send the tracks to everybody and say, here, I'll play the guitar and everything too, and say, here's where I'm at. Nice. What can we do with this? Yeah. So we just been having, life got interrupted. Obviously, this past weekend we were supposed to be playing at St. Vitus, as a matter of fact.
Oh man, damn it!
That's right.
Salt in the wound. Fuck.
Yeah, two shows. It was all set. It was all done.
Damn it! I would have loved to have seen that shit.
Yeah. See, this is what happens. Yeah. See, the world goes sideways. Our shows get canceled.
Right.
So we've been thinking about it for a while.
Okay.
And the documentary that Bill's been doing has made it a lot more fun. We hadn't seen each other. I mean, me and Crispy and had stayed close to, like where we still, we're always sending each other stupid crap once a week or whatever. Tim Nauman, the funny thing is, obviously this goes into more depth in when the fourth media production comes out, but Tim Nauman is a high school teacher.
Oh, wow.
Which is funny.
Yeah.
Keith lives in way upstate New York, like almost Canada.
Okay.
Working in like some auto parts thing, which he hates.
Mm-hmm.
Tim Singer lives in Philadelphia. He's got 3 kids.
Wow.
One's in college, which is freaky.
Damn.
He's got a graphic design shop that he's had forever on his own.
Wow.
Crispy runs a foundation. He works with like deaf and disabled kids. That's what he's been doing for a while. Another one is like, totally weird. And then when those guys split off and moved to Seattle, Tom and Jim joined us. Tom was our roadie, Tom Yak, who's like a pretty famous tattooer who was a tattooer back then. He's still doing that down in Asbury. And then Jim Baglino, who was in Human Remains and then came on bass when Tim Nauman switched to singing. He was in Monster Magnet for like 15 years and like has been toured all over the world as a playing bass, oddly. And he was like a shredder guitar player. Yeah. And now he's a sound man. So he works for like he won like an Emmy for like the Super Bowl or something ridiculous. Damn. For the sound of it. Totally weird. So I saw him for the first time. So we hadn't seen each other for like, 20 years, some of us. And it was all positive. We actually played a little bit in Bill's studio in Hoboken. Mm-hmm. So we remembered the songs more or less. And it's, trying. Now I still practice. This is the thing. I was like, as you get older, as I'm sure at some point somebody's tell you like, go do yoga. You gotta, like, no, like I'm not doing that. Like even if I occasionally do yoga, I can't suspend disbelief for long enough. But like I'll practice, So I sit on the stupid pad. I'll play the goddamn rudiments. I still do the syncopation book. I'm doing the John Riley books on the practicing all the jazz stuff.
Nice.
And I play guitar too. So like I take guitar lessons and like I still like I'm okay using that as my my escape.
Right.
Like everybody, we all need something.
Yeah.
I feel like it's like it's a positive thing. So like I can still play all the Deadguy songs. It took me a minute. Yeah. The funny part about that is I went to this rehearsal studio in Amsterdam, and it was when I was first, I had my chops back, but I hadn't been like playing on real drums. I sat down to play like the whole Fixation album, and maybe 3 songs in, I hear like somebody pounding on the door, and like this is a rehearsal studio, and the lady comes in and says, "Look, we got a complaint. You're too loud."
Wow.
I was like, "What?" Yeah. I was like,
come on.
Oh no, this is. I know. I was like, where are we here? So,
call the management. That's a problem with insulation.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I won the prize at the ugly contest. I was
know,
like,
right?
You go, jerk.
Wow, that's amazing.
So we're getting there, man. So I still, I was joking about my favorite rudiment, but like, it's funny as you get back and start focusing on like, I love a paradiddle diddle. Who knew?
Yeah.
I have no recollection of ever playing that as a kid.
Really?
But you do the once you start doing the lifetime warm-ups and all this other kind of stuff, like it's been cool to sort of relearn the instrument that you played forever,
Right.
And I was trying to think. Somebody had asked me, what was your first sort of like drumming, whatever, and like definitely like the funny thing is I think about it. My parents, definitely my father was big into the big band stuff, but I feel like Steve Miller Band was always in my house.
There you go.
Things,
Classic
which
rock.
is a weird one.
Yeah.
But I believe it was Animal from the Muppets.
There you
go. Right? Because that'd be the right age bracket. Where
Absolutely.
Animal was it, man. That was what got me going.
And there's the great footage of Buddy Rich when he was on the show with he and Animal doing the battle. It's so awesome.
Yeah, it's the best. Yeah, I never got to see Buddy Rich. So this is the other thing as I've gotten over the last 20 years. I started to try to see every every musician. It's like I miss Tony Williams. I never saw.
Yeah.
He's still one of my favorites. And I
Absolutely.
have the Spizzicino TW Ride. I don't know if you're familiar with that crazy cymbal maker. So there was a guy named Roberto Spizzicino, I guess you'd say it. Italian cymbal maker who made like 1,000 cymbals, and he died suddenly. Just weird.
Wow.
And they're super collectible, and he was obsessed with Tony and Elvin. So he made like the TW cymbal that sounds exactly like the what Tony played all through the Miles years.
Whoa, really?
It's honestly, I can't control it. Like I'm not good enough for it.
Yeah.
You have to have a light touch.
Right.
But I have the Elvin one, which I can play the Elvin because he hits so hard. So I never got to see Tony Williams, but I went to see Elvin at the Blue Note in 95 or 94 or 5.
Wow.
And he hobbled on stage, and I'm like, this is going to be very depressing. He sat down and killed it. Wow. It blew my mind. So it was super inspiring. And I saw Max Roach, and one of my first dates, if you will, with my wife is I took her to see Roy Haynes. Yeah. At the Village Vanguard, and she fell asleep. He was doing a hi-hat. He was doing like a hi-hat solo. She just fell right asleep, and I was like, "Well, this could work out well. This doesn't bother her. Like, I think we're good, man."
Yeah, that is hilarious.
Yeah. So I tried, and then I saw Clapton in Tokyo last year because I'm always afraid. And we took the kid to see Black Sabbath.
Awesome.
As well. Yeah, so you gotta go see all these things. This is the thing, like obviously with the live music being shut off right now. I think especially people don't realize that we may not get that chance again.
Totally.
The fact that when I saw Today's the Day at CB's they were on that tour, that Am Rep tour. It was them and Guzzard and a couple others, and like, man, I was like, it blew my mind. I didn't even know how to react. It was like that. It was like such a big thing to see that live. And I mean, that's what we're all missing here. And same thing, like when I saw Elvin, I was like, good God, I don't know how to react to this. It's completely insane.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, it's good stuff, man. Yeah, I always kind of held on to the mantra that if you want to go see somebody, you're better off going to see them because you don't know if they're going to die, or if, God forbid, hey, a pandemic comes along, then all the music venues get shut down. So you're better off going to see them while you can, man. It's absolutely true.
You gotta go. Yeah. So I went to go see like Pat Metheny, who I don't even really like, but I was like, I gotta go see it, right? Same thing. Saw all these other guys. Who I did see that guy? Is it Antonio Sanchez, the guy who did all the Birdman soundtrack?
Yes.
Pretty insane to watch him play. It's interesting because like sound wise, I love the way he sounds. I hate watching him play, which is a weird thing.
Right.
I feel the same thing about Mark Juliana. I love hearing him play. Can't watch him for some reason.
Yeah, they have very extremely light touches. They're not the most broad stroke. It's amazing, but then you isolate just the play and you're like, holy shit, what is going on here? And then they just make it look so easy. It's like they're not even playing it. Yeah, it's wild.
It's almost it almost makes you a little angry. And there's same thing with Brian Blade.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Where I was like, I physically don't understand how he's doing it. Like, it doesn't make my brain. I'm watching him do it. It doesn't make sense. Right. There's something off here. But it's amazing. So that's where I've been. And I watch now all these like guys like Eric Moore and these dudes who just shred.
Yeah.
Musically shred, and it's like it's a thing, man. Like it's impressive. Totally. I just worry for all these people who are maybe forced to get a day job, right? At some point, like, you might want a day job. You may not be capable of one, but it's you gotta make that choice. Like I knew at some point when we stopped playing, whatever that was, like 96.
Yeah.
Chris B had gotten a real job. Is basically what it came down to. He got a teaching job, and I was like, we weren't going to go to Europe for 3 months and make $300. It's like, it just became ridiculous. Like we had already graduated college. I was going to a job at like Bell Labs, So after that, I ended up playing, and I think you asked me at the beginning, and I ignored it. But once I moved, I found San Francisco a little bit tough. I did play still with some random people. I played in a country band, recorded an album with a friend of mine who needed a drummer. Kind of fun. Didn't like it enough to keep doing it. Yeah. But it was good to be out playing. And I played with some rockabilly guys. And some of that was just like, well, when you take lessons as a drummer, especially at that as a kid, like you learned to play every style. Like I don't know if you had the same thing, but with like Sonny, it was like you had to play it all. There was it wasn't an option.
Totally.
and so it was like, yeah, sure, rockabilly, whatever. We're gonna play samba. It's great. I used to occasionally sub for a friend of mine who had like a kind of a good bar band, but also sort of terrible. And you play like 3 hours. You play like Neil. You play like Cinnamon Girl for like the third time.
Right.
It's like, I don't know. I've heard this song once on the radio.
Yeah.
And then I played with some like kind of heavier guys. But, the San Francisco thing, I think, was a challenge because I was already whatever, I owned a house and I worked in the tech industry and whatever. And these were not people who were, these were people who were still trying to make it. And I was like, dude, we're not making anything.
Yeah.
I know the story.
Right.
So I did some stuff like that. I just, I kept just kind of playing a lot. And then when we moved in San Francisco, my neighbor across the street was a pretty serious guitar player, like a kind of a shredder, but also classical. And we had a lot of the same. So we would just like play Rush songs. We could play them, and that was awesome. That was it was like a big sort of change for me. And I played with a bunch of other whatever people who were musicians by chance. But I think it becomes hard to find people to play with. I mean, since I've lived here, I have found no one in Amsterdam to play with, which is super weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been very. And people, even like. I meet these kids at the guitars and their kids, at the guitar shop or the music store nearby. And like, what kind of music do you into or whatever? And they're like, yeah, when the Red Hot Chili Peppers came out, when John Frusciante played, that really changed me. And I'm like, okay, whatever you're into, but we're so far off,
Yeah.
from, and then there's, in Europe, electronic music is so huge.
Absolutely.
It's just tougher to find. And the other thing is in lesser, I don't know so much about in here in the Netherlands, but the stoner rock thing even died out in the UK. So like, our Orange Goblin and all those bands.
Yep.
A lot of it, just interest was lost, I've got buddies who have a guitar store in London and they get a lot of cool people through there. But to them, like their point of reference is like Slash. That's their golden god.
Right.
And whatever. He's great. I don't need to ever listen to it. So it's been interesting having as like a professional / terrible drummer. I can still play all that stuff, but I don't find myself having the opportunity to do it. And that's been interesting as an adult. So my kid, she plays guitar. She can play and sing, which pisses me off all the time because I never could do it. Yeah. But she plays guitar, but she doesn't like it as loud as I do.
Yeah, bad.
So but it's still fun. So we still play, and like she'll occasionally jam with me if I'm looking sad in the corner.
Right. It's good that you've been able to keep interest in it, and even if it's at just a rudimental level, and just keeping up with that in light of maybe not playing live so much or playing with other people and playing the drum set, so to speak. So that's at least impressive that you've been able to keep at it, so to speak.
Yeah, I got free time. I look at it that way. It's like I don't smoke. Yeah. And therefore, I can spend money on soda and I can practice.
There it is. I'm into it. Nice.
Take that one, kids.
Yeah, right. Oh, man, that's good. Well, man, Dave, it was great talking to you. Fun running through the Deadguy years and then up to present and prior to and all that good stuff. And, man, I hope when this thing clears, Deadguy could come through and I can finally see y'all in the flesh because I never got to see y'all live. So it would be amazing to see it in the flesh. Hopefully y'all can come back through New York soon, man.
Absolutely, yeah, I appreciate it, and it is a honor to be on this part of all this this esteemed company of drummers. I appreciate it, and look forward to the next one.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Good talking to you, buddy.
Thanks.
All right, everybody, thanks for tuning in. Thanks to Dave for rapping. It's really cool talking to him about Deadguy and picking his brain about the mid-'90s scene in which they operated in, subgenre, sub-scene, if you will. But that band left an undeniable impression on bands that I would inevitably become a fan of later on. So shout out to Deadguy. We'll catch y'all on the next one. Crash, bang, boom.